Welcome to the Data Science Hangout. So nice to see you all. Hope everybody's having a great week. Beautiful here in Boston today. I think it's about 70 degrees. But I'm Rachel Dempsey. I lead our pro community at Posit. And the Data Science Hangout is our open space to chat about data science leadership, questions you're facing, and getting to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries. And so it happens every Thursday, pretty much every single Thursday, unless it's a holiday, or at the same time, same place. So if you're watching this recording at some point later on YouTube, you can add it to your calendar, details below. But every week we feature a different data science leader as my co-host to help lead our discussion and answer questions from you all. So together, we're all dedicated to making this a welcoming environment for everyone. We love hearing from everybody, no matter your level of experience or area of work. So it is totally okay to just listen in if you want, but there's also 3 ways you can jump in and ask questions or provide your own perspective on certain topics. So you can jump in by raising your hand on Zoom. You could put questions in the Zoom chat and just put a little star next to it if you want me to read it out instead. And then we also have a Slido link where you can ask questions anonymously. And I think, Curtis, you can grab that Slido link and share it in the chat. But I'm so excited to have Natalie joining us here today. Natalie O'Shea is an analytics consultant at BetterUp. And Natalie, I'd love to start with having you introducing yourself and maybe share a little bit about your work and something you like to do outside of work too.
Sure. Yeah. So as Rachel said, I'm Natalie. Yeah, I'm an analytics consultant at BetterUp. And a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is focused actually on building a flexible, scalable reporting system in Shiny. And I'm like fresh on that right now because I just finished recording my Posit conference talk. So hopefully maybe going to share some of those learnings there. Yeah, I could go on and on. I have a very long and winding road to where I ended up. So lots of diversions and different experiences. But yeah, outside of work, well, I've got my drum kit here. I have not been practicing as much as I should, but that's kind of a hobby of mine, trying to learn how to drum as an adult. I never learned a musical instrument when I was growing up. And then I saw one of my favorite bands at a jazz club and I was like, all right, I need to learn to drum. So I'm a very bad drummer. I will also say my birthday was yesterday or the day before. Now I'm forgetting, but
happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. I'm bringing it up because a new hobby, no, not quite a hobby, but I got to meet beluga whales at the Shedd Aquarium and that was pretty awesome. So now I'm like wanting to become a whale trainer as well on the side. We'll see about that.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, you said your favorite band. Who's your favorite band?
It's a band called Lettuce. Yeah, they're like a jazz, funk, hip hop band. They're very fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
So while we wait for questions to come in from everyone, I thought it'd be helpful to kind of put ourselves in the mindset of some of the work that you do at BetterUp. Would you be able to share maybe a use case that comes to mind for your data team?
Yeah. So the whole kind of approach I'm building right now, it's I'm a consultant, though I'm not really directly consulting as much right now. I'm kind of supporting a lot of our consultants, but as consultants, they need to be able to kind of customize reports and presentations for partners. So I built out a system within Shiny to actually populate slide decks with metrics and visualizations. And I can go on and on about the reasons why I took that approach, but a big reason why I wanted to have all of that kind of populate in Google slide decks was so that, we can customize the look and feel and the story of any given company's data specifically tailored to them. And so, yeah, I can go on and on about like why I chose that approach over something like parameterized reporting, which I'm also a big fan of. But yeah, that's kind of a big project of mine right now. And then in addition to that, we know each other because I've been leading a pretty major procurement effort, and we're in the final stages now of like installing Posit software. So we're really excited about that. But I learned a lot about what it takes to kind of build a business case for data science tooling at your organization, and getting buy-in across the org. And it's, it's a pretty major lift to get something like that off the ground.
What was one of the biggest lessons learned in building business case?
I would say like one of the biggest lessons learned in building the business case was have kind of a flagship project that ties to direct business value. So the project that I'm doing really helps automate a lot of our processes and makes it a lot faster and easier and more streamlined to populate these decks with different data insights. And so that was enough of a driver, kind of showcasing the additional flexibility that open source programming tools offer us over a more business intelligence tool. That was really a big driver in what led us to get this software. So I'd say having kind of a project that you can directly tie to business value, that's like a big learning from it. And then I'd say another learning from it, I would never have been able to get this pushed through if I didn't have a supportive manager who really walked me through the whole process and helped me navigate a lot of the organizational hierarchy to get something like this off the ground. So kind of finding and developing your community of allies that are also interested in the same thing as you, you're definitely not going to be able to do this alone.
Well, thank you so much for that. That's really helpful. And your data team at BetterUp, I think, is a mix of R and Python users. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
And are they going to use that environment too?
Yes. Yeah. So I've really sorry, my dog is like chewing up my plant, but
what's your dog's name?
Name's Gino.
Okay.
If anyone here is a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, that's where the name is coming from. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So our Python users. So I've been really focused on developing our community at BetterUp, and we've made some big strides in that. The Python user community tends to be, I'd say, more focused on machine learning use cases. So I've had some interactions with them, and I'm using Python right now in my project. But we're definitely, I'd say the R user community is a little more vibrant. I think I'm not here to start the like R versus Python debate, but I do find that I think our users are just like kind of tend to be more quirky and like really excited about R, and Python users are like, this is the tool to get the job done. And Python is a great tool to get the job done, but I'm just such a fan of our community. But one of the ways in which I kind of reached out to our Python community when we were going through this procurement process was actually, challenging myself to learn how to use Vetiver for ML ops, and doing that all within VS Code and Quarto, so that I could kind of showcase, hey, this isn't just a tool for our users. This really is a tool for Python users as well. This is how it could be implemented in your own workflow. Obviously, with the caveat that I am by no means a machine learning expert. So, but kind of taking the time to showcase the capabilities in their tools and language of choice. I'd say that was also kind of a big learning from this effort.
That's really valuable. Thank you. I just put the link to the Vetiver package in there if people hadn't heard of it before too. I see Tatsu's calling me out and saying it's not that nice in Boston. I would say like 65 is close enough to 70 at 3 p.m. It's going to be that nice. Maybe not right this second.
It is cloudy and it's wet, Rachel.
Well, I'm thinking of like the time where I get outside a little bit later, that it's going to be nicer.
That's fair enough. There's potential.
So Ishwar, I see you asked a question in the chat with a little star. It's a little long for me to read, but
no problem.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I'm a data scientist working with Nissan, based in Franklin, Tennessee. it's great to know about Natalie. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and insights about that. I have been working on the same near similar environments. Like I have been developing few R Shiny applications, and then I have deployed into our production server, that is our Studio Connect.
Mhm.
But a lot of time there have been circumstances that when I have deployed the application, it perfectly runs fine in my local environment. And then when it is published, there like in the server, it gives issues, not so frequently, but kind of once in a while, right? Maybe once in a month or two or three, something like that. So, and we had to raise the ticket or contact the admins and take their help to resolve the issue. And then they take a couple of days. And, meanwhile, we had to communicate to the business and, hey, the app is not running, apologize. So give us a couple of days, those kind of issues. So have you worked in these situations ever? And then how did you, any efforts you have taken to make the work seamless or non-disturbing from the business standpoint?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I wish I had one of my collaborators here, Harsh, who is on our data ops team. And so another learning, again, in the vein of like building a community of allies that support you in this work, I'm very lucky to have someone who's really focused on the installation and deployment side of things. Right now, we're actually working through that exact issue. So I'm kind of bouncing around here, but I'm a huge proponent, or I really love the Rhino framework for Shiny. I don't know if you've encountered that at all, but one of the nice things about it is that you use renv for package management. And so there's a lock file, right, with all of your package sources. So we've been working through some issues with that right now because we did get the full Posit team suite of products. So now we're just having to make sure that the lock file is reading from a package manager instead of like a binary source. So I'm a little out of my depth in terms of like all the specifics with deployment, but we're definitely in the stages right now. So we just finished installing Posit and Workbench, and we are trying to deploy the app at the moment, but we haven't quite finished it out because in addition to like our environment package management stuff that we're working with, there's also the Python aspect of the app. And so making sure that we have our, whether it's a Conda environment or some sort of pip environment, something for the Python environment. So yeah, we're just ironing out some of those deployment issues, but definitely a very common problem. I would say I can't quite speak to all of the like technical aspects of that deployment, but on the more human side of things, one approach that we've taken with how we're deploying this app out to our organization is starting with like our more internal team and then kind of slowly ramping it out so that we don't just open the floodgates to everyone and then are kind of like, putting out fires, but taking a more slow approach so that people know, hey, we're in the early stages of deploying this. We're still ironing out the kinks. I do know that our data ops engineer is really focused on making sure that we employ a like infrastructure as code approach to how we're deploying things. So anywhere and everywhere that we can kind of like codify things in Kubernetes, we are. So there's just a lot of moving parts to deploying an app to production, even if it's not, partner facing production, but just internal use. And I think one of the most important things about deploying a Shiny app like this is you want people to trust it. So I think taking the time and really building in some buffer so that that the app is going to be load tested and reliable, all of these things before it goes out to people is a good practice so that you don't deteriorate trust in your data products.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And then, quite frankly, our team, like from the developer standpoint, like from data scientist and data analyst standpoint, we kind of, whenever there was some issues in the applications, we have directly reached out to admin and, he handles from the package manager standpoint and then from the maintenance standpoint in the production. But yeah, I think that's good suggestions. I should probably discuss with him sometime and then, get the proper package managers or maybe Rhino that you included. Yeah.
I
Okay.
see, I see Catherine, you had some thoughts on this topic too in the chat. And sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here.
No, that's
Okay.
okay. Just mentioning, we use the Posit products and get back deployment. So from our version control repository, my team kind of has a workflow where we do like a dev deployment. So we have our master deployment and that kind of sits there. And we also have a get back deployment from our develop branch. So any changes that we make can be tested there, vetted out before it goes to the version of the app that our customers are using. And so that can kind of troubleshoot some of those issues where it's like, oh, I forgot I installed the dev version of a package on my local thing trying to get this new feature, but you didn't fix your manifest before it goes to the deployment. And so that would break, and you can find that out from your dev deployments before it ever gets to that customer interaction interruption.
Yeah, and a lot of time funny but not funny thing is that we perfectly test in the dev, and then application is running for about 2 weeks, a month or so, and then like all of a sudden like it crashes in production, like it's trusted, and then business like literally we make habit to the and consumers that they can wake up in the morning and first thing they open up is the application report, and then all of a sudden like 10 emails coming into the inbox, hey, sure, it's not working. So those kind of things. So yeah, I mean, great inputs. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll
Thank you.
just plus what Catherine said, having that deployment environment. And then again, I'm just like going to keep pushing the Rhino framework. I think it's fantastic. There's also some really good continuous integration features with that, so that when you do, merge your development branch into main, you're having some really good tests being done to make sure that it can run in various environments. So that's part of the continuous integration, is a test that like, does this run on Mac? Does this run on Linux? Does it work on Windows? And as long as all those tests are passing, it's not a guarantee that there won't ever be something that comes in and kind of brings it all down. But, building in as many fail safes as possible is always a good practice.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I see. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no,
Sorry.
I was just,
No,
the
just cut over.
continuous integration is definitely a new territory, I think, for many data scientists.
I wanted to make sure to get over to some of the anonymous questions too, and just remind people you can ask questions over there on Slido as well if we want to reshare in the chat here. But one question was, what advice do you have for consulting work? And they said, I had a brief experience last year and it was tough because of their data quality issues.
Data quality, that is like the hill that I will die on constantly. Like I find myself always making the case that like, I know we want to build these complex machine learning models or this or that, but like first and foremost, data quality. And I'm excited for your talk next week, because I know one of my our heroes is Emily Reeder. I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but she's such an inspiration for like things like grouped data checks. So I think I like living at that intersection between data engineering and data science, and trying to kind of make sure we have reliable data pipelines. Haven't yet gone into DBT, but that's definitely something on the agenda. But data with consulting. So data quality and consulting. That is a constant struggle. I think I really do take my role. I'm not as much external consulting, but I consult internally with our team. So kind of setting expectations of what is possible given our current data architecture and data quality, and working closely with like our analytics engineers to get those data quality tests built in that match the level of granularity that you're trying to work with. But yeah, that's a constant issue. I feel like there was something else I was going to respond to with that, and now I'm completely blanking on what it was that I was going to address in terms of the consulting. Maybe I'll remember.
You can tell us when it comes back to you.
Yeah, it'll just be like one of those light bulb moments. Bing. Oh, that was it.
Travis, I see you had a question in the chat. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. Hey, curious about the sometimes boring side of cloud infrastructure, our admin. We're kind of struggling with this a little bit right now. Thinking about, we are going to be hiring a cloud architect soon, and we want that person obviously to land POSIT products wherever we go. I don't know anything about Kubernetes. I'm glad other people do. What does that look like for you all? Do you have a separate team that kind of runs that show? How often do you interact with them? Like, what's that look like? Did you work with these so-called full service providers to kind of get this stuff set up? Any tips there are welcome. Thanks.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the same boat. And thank God for like the data engineers that do love the Kubernetes stuff. I'm like, that's great. I'm so glad you like that. That's not the world that I want to live in, but I recognize its importance. I will plug one of the things that we did to make sure that we were getting off on the right foot with all of our POSIT products was we got, I think 3 or 6 months, I forget, of technical account management support. So we have weekly TAM meetings, and that's kind of where we surface a lot of like these issues. So if we're having trouble with the particular deployment or we're running into package installation issues and we're not sure like how to address them, our TAM support team is really helpful in making sure we get that all set up. I feel super fortunate, again, to the point of like build your group of allies and like, and make you're going to need a community around you to build this stuff out. And we were very lucky to get the support of our data ops team. So always, we're in an interesting stage in our business right now because we are a startup and, we've had, kind of more quick startup-y processes, and we're at that stage in development where we're really trying to, again, take an infrastructure as code approach with how we build out stuff. So our data ops squad is pretty new, but I'm an anthropologist by training, so I'm all about relationships. So build those relationships with your data engineers, and those kind of folks that do this. In our organization, I know not every organization does this, but once a quarter, our product team does a make-a-thon. And this is just an opportunity for us to, team up with other people, put whatever crazy idea you have out there, and then start to build some of those cross-functional relationships. So one of the make-a-thons that we did in the past on our team, I proposed like, okay, we need to start to document and build out some best practices on custom application development. And that was how I actually built the bridge between our team and our data ops team, because I knew I got to reach out to our data ops team, like they can help us kind of define some of these best practices. And so, yeah, I look for like little informal fun opportunities to build those relationships, because that make-a-thon then was what got us that support for getting the support for installation of the products, because I'm not a Linux admin. I could not, you wouldn't want me to set up these products. So having someone who's enthusiastic about that makes all the difference. And it's really great because I think when you develop that relationship, you can also really make it clear what your needs are. So one of the big needs on our team was simply, we work from a Snowflake database. Getting that connection set up has always been a pain for people. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to get Workbench. And so now we have a close relationship with our data ops team. They understand like all of the intricacies of why it's hard for us to connect to the database, or the connection isn't stable, or like it varies across different machines. And so our engineer is currently working on like a very streamlined process so that people don't ever have to think about setting up their database connection. They can just log in via SSO and then get into Workbench, and that's all done for them. So yeah, I'm not that person, but I think I do a decent job of like finding those people and making sure that they know that, we appreciate their work and we need it desperately.
That's awesome. Rachel, will you allow me a follow-up question?
Of course, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, first, that's good info about the TAM, because we just had a kickoff with POSIT's TAM group, and it seems like it'll be really helpful. So glad to hear that it worked well for you all. We'll pursue that as well. But yeah, the Workbench, I'm intrigued by this. So I saw Hadley posting something recently about like VS Code and Workbench? Like, what's y'all's experience with Workbench so far? Like, I didn't know it did all that stuff. And in particular, I'm very curious about Copilot in VS Code. I know that's not going to be something that's in the RStudio like products natively, for good reasons, but is that something y'all are doing Workbench so far so good?
Well, I don't know about all the Copilot stuff, so maybe someone from Posit can talk to that. But yeah, that was like kind of how I sold sold Posit products internally, because I think, you know, I'm such a fan of the new brand rename to Posit, because I think previously it was really hard to make a case for an R and Python approach to data science with RStudio, formerly known as RStudio products, because everyone assumed that that was all you could do. But like I mentioned earlier, when I was kind of going around trying to make the business case for this tooling, I was like, okay, I know that a lot of our Python users use VS Code and Python, so like I need to show them what a piece of their work would look like in Python and VS Code on this platform, to kind of, you know, fully convince them that it's not just theoretical, that yes, you can spin up a VS Code instance, but like show them, yeah, here's me, little old me that doesn't ever work in VS Code or Python, not ever, but rarely, spinning up, you know, a machine learning ops kind of system in those products. So yeah, we're definitely using that. We haven't really deployed Workbench out to like the broader team yet, because again, taking that approach of like iron out the kinks first before you open it up to a broader group of people. So myself and one of my colleagues are kind of working with our data ops team to make sure that it's a really good experience once we do open the gates for the rest of our organization. And making sure that our Python users are able to use their tools of choice as well is a big part of that.
Awesome, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So something that I wanted to ask you about is, I know leading up to this, we were talking a little bit about like developing communities of belonging. And one of the communities you're a part of is Data Science by Design. And just want to make sure we chatted a little bit about that too.
Oh my God. Yeah, I could talk forever about this community. So I like hesitate. I'm technically on the leadership committee for Data Science by Design, which was like such an honor to be a part of that. I've been doing that since their first meeting last, what was that? Summer of 2021. The pandemic years all blur together for me, but yeah, like this community is just like small but mighty. We have a lot of, so I come from kind of an organizing background as well. So doing a lot of community organizing, and we have a lot of people in the community organizing world there. And a lot of us are big fans of Adrienne Marie Brown. And we've kind of talked about who wrote a book that for me was like life-changing called Emergent Strategy. And we've really have taken the approach with this community to focus on, she calls it in Emergent Strategy, an inch wide, mile deep organizing strategy, something along those lines, which is essentially just like prioritizing quality and deep relationships and like a vibrant community over the breadth and the largeness of the community. So I think that approach has been amazing. So yeah, it's such a great group. We really, we do a lot of like creative coding stuff. A lot of the people in our community, actually, Ijamaka and Charla are going to be doing a workshop on, I think it was at Posit, like bringing out your inner artist or something like that. So we've got a lot of people that are really interested in the intersections between art, design, data science, community organizing. Like it's quite an interesting mix of people, but it all kind of ties together somehow. Could not recommend that group more. We actually have an anthology coming out pretty soon here. We released an anthology last year. That was, what was the title of it? Now I'm forgetting because I'm so focused on this new anthology, but the new anthology is our environment. So we're really talking about environments broadly defined. A lot of environmental data scientists submitted work there. but we also have, topics on things like community building, your local environment, things like that. So yeah, I don't even know quite where to start with that community, but again, when you find like a group of people that's just so supportive, I think, entering the data science field can be so overwhelming because there's so many facets to it and things that you feel like you need to be an expert in. And you don't. Like, everyone has their own expertise. Everyone has their own lived experience that they bring to the table that is really important for how we build out things. So I often find that it's not the most technical person in the room that has the best ideas. It's the person with like the most direct experience with the problem that you're trying to solve. So yeah, that's a long-winded approach to say that I absolutely love that community and very proud to be kind of part of it.
That's wonderful. I see a lot of comments here on community too in the chat. And Alan, I think you just asked a question here. I can't read it all right now, but do you want to jump in?
Yeah, maybe I wrote too much and I
Well, no, I just meant I couldn't like see it that quickly and then know if there was a question, but I think it's in there.
Yeah, there is a question there eventually. I think this is probably applicable beyond Workbench, but my thinking about it, Natalie, started when you were talking about the sort of gradual expansion of that as a tool to a broader audience. And what I'm experiencing a lot right now is tension between like portfolio simplification of tools versus autonomy. And I wonder what that conversation was like for you and your team to consider, like, what should the scope of something like this be? And what are the various trade-offs of trying to make it like broadly useful, maybe being better supported, but having a steeper hill to climb versus being autonomous, but maybe less well supported, and what those conversations were like.
Yeah, so I think, we use like Looker a lot internally as our business intelligence tool. So I feel like that's kind of where like a lot of our efforts, right, as an analytics team have been like devoted to that. But as great as Looker is in its many ways, like there are always questions that you're not going to be able to answer with a business intelligence tool. So we've always had people working in R and Python and doing their own analyses. So we, I think a big part of like how we sold that in terms of like the autonomous side of things is people are working internally or like on their local machines and things like that. And that's obviously not analytics best practice. So we want to move to a more cloud computing kind of approach. And that also, in terms of like making the business case for things like that, that helps shore up our digital like security. So making the case that we can have a one-stop shop that supports both R and Python users in a secure cloud environment where they get to use the tools that they like. You're not, forcing Python users to use RStudio. You're not forcing RStudio users to use VS Code. Like, everyone gets their cake and gets to eat it too. I'm terrible at like these kind of phrases, but yeah, I think that was a big part of that. I think it remains to be seen, right? We're kind of have a small like developer license group initially because we need to prove that value first. So that's kind of a big part of that. So I think once people start to see us producing value and centralizing on this tool, that will help us make the case to expand the developer community on Posit. I'm also, we're in the early stages of developing, like, there's the app that I'm working on, but a lot of the logic that exists in that app, we're trying to move into, because it's pulling directly from our database and doing some standard analyses, we're trying to move that into an internal package. So I think once there's like aligning on the tools, but then there's also aligning on the code and the workflows. So I think internal package development is a great inroad to not only proving the tools value, but also aligning people on how we work with data. Because here I am going to be like fangirling over Emily Reiterer again, but she just recently put out a great blog post that really laid out the differences between SQL, R, and both pandas and NumPy in Python, and how they handle nulls differently and how this leads to completely different results sometimes. So I think it's really important to align on workflows in addition to aligning on tools. But I think that those tools enable the like workflow centralization as well, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah, thanks. I really like hearing the sort of stories in this moment of adoption and then figuring out how to go further and what those cases are like and what those team processes are like. So yeah, happy you had success and hopefully there's more in there I can learn from. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So a question I remember we used to always ask this in the beginning, but what is something that you're most excited about in the year ahead when you think about your data team?
Oh, well, I wonder if she's listening on this call, but we recently, so one of my like my best work friend from a different part of the organization recently transferred onto our team so that we could work more closely together. And we are building out this internal data processing package and kind of trying to develop some onboarding materials for Posit. So I feel a little like imposter syndrome and being like, we're successful with Posit already because we're like just at the beginning stages and have so much more to learn. So I'm most excited about like really working with my friend to like build out the onboarding for all of this, to build some shared workflows, and then to kind of socialize that more broadly in our organization. I think that will clearly demonstrate the value of like why we invested in these tools. So it gets me excited to think about people actually like using the apps we're developing, people being able to like easily access all of the different reports. Like one of the first projects we're planning on doing once we get all of this like really up and running and all the like deployment issues kind of like ironed out is building a central landing page, like from the Posit, like curating your data science content with the Connect widgets package, which I'm so excited. I get really excited about getting people to be able to share their work more broadly, more seamlessly. So there's so many like really interesting reports and things that people are doing at our organization that often don't have the kind of reach and impact that they could if we just had a tool so that they could easily like deploy it and just say like, here's a URL that shows all of the reports that our team has done on this specific topic. And like, you can just go through and see like all of these interesting trends and tools that have been developed. So I'm very, very excited about like everything that this new tooling will offer us and just like building that workflow that makes things really easy for people. Yeah.
That's great. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody's question. So feel free to raise your hand here on Zoom or copy back over into the chat. I don't see too many over on Slido. But Jared, I think you had a question earlier about GitHub Actions. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, Natalie, I just had a quick question about your like internal checks that you do for your programming like applications, and if you have them in sort of like an automatic fashion, or is this something that you essentially from the ground up trying to build in checks as you go along to ensure not only consistency but integrity of the data, so you're not trying to put so many fires out that it becomes insurmountable, if that makes sense?
Oh yeah, 100%. Man, I feel like I'm just like beating this drum of the Rhino framework, but I'm still fairly new to continuous integration. I've done a little bit of like CI/CD stuff with Power BI before this, but this is my first time deploying a Shiny app with continuous integration, and I did not develop it from the ground up. That was one of I really love the Rhino package because it forces you into some best practices, and that's one of the things that it forces you into. Since deploying the app with that framework, I have learned a little bit more about GitHub Actions and have modified that template. You must best practice, Tatsu. Yeah, so like for instance, the framework, the way the GitHub action is set up, it runs a series of different tests on every push. And I realized, oh my God, like this is just like every time I push a change to the app, it's running these continuous integration tests and it's just like overwhelming. So I realized, oh, I just need to change the YAML header and I can make it so that it's only on pull request that it runs these checks. So things like that. So that was kind of like a design thing that was built into the Rhino package that forced me to learn something that I should have been doing the whole time, but you know, I'm in a weird position now where I'm like starting to become like more recognized as like a shiny developer in my organization. People are like coming to me for advice. And I always tell them like, I'm giving you this advice because I've made this mistake 10 billion times before and it's painful. So when I'm telling you like it's worth learning shiny modules, it's because I've built 10 billion shiny Frankenstein apps that like quickly grow in complexity and then are horrible to debug and all of these things. So yeah, that's a long-winded explanation, but again, plugging the Rhino framework for forcing me to learn about GitHub Actions. And then the things that I didn't like about the like default settings, that helped me learn about GitHub Actions because then I needed to learn how to like modify those settings. So I'm running linters, you know, yeah, again, like setting up some deployment. I don't even fully understand how it's testing the runs on Linux and R and everything, or Linux and Mac and all of these different setups. But to the vein of like building relationships, the fact that I had that in my application made the data ops team take me more seriously, and they were more willing to support my efforts to get this tooling and to get it built out, because they saw, oh, you're not just like ragtag shiny apps that like can never go anywhere. You're like building in more robust ways, and therefore I'm willing to put in the time and effort to support you, because why would you spend all this time and effort Dockerize, or not Docker, but like putting in building an entire infrastructure in Kubernetes if the person that you're trying to help isn't even like building something in a way that can be maintained. So I'm a big proponent of like meet your engineers halfway, and you'll have a lot more success. So where and when possible, really try and demonstrate some robust engineering practices.
Awesome. Anas, I see you have your hand raised. You want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. Natalie, so our team has recently expanded. We're not a big team, about 3 or 4 people that use R. Obviously, we're not advanced enough to get into the shinies, but just broadly, do you have any tips on the best ways to kind of establish best practices? We're in our infancy. We're more like, do we store these R scripts in our network drive or in a SharePoint? Like, just in general, we're trying to come up with some procedures and standards, and it feels like you've done that before. You've been there.
I've been there. I am there. Yeah, it's I would say, like, again, the anthropologist in me is coming out, but like focus on relationships first, because inevitably, like what you define as a best practice on first case, like you're not going to be doing that best practice like 6 months, not always, right? Like there's certain things that will stay, and like teaching your team to like use Git branches and merge into main, and like those things are going to be pretty stable. But like there's other more thorny questions that are really hard to build best practices around. So for example, in our team, we support a lot of different organizations, right? With different data analyses, and like, how do we, like, what size of repo do we put everything into one big GitHub repo, or do we make a repo for every organization, for every project? Like, it's always in development and it's constantly iterating. So being comfortable with that, I think, is a key part of developing best practices, because it's never going to be just like a set it and forget it best practice. It's going to be constantly in relationship and building together those best practices. I find like we run in our users office hours every 2 weeks. And I often don't have an agenda or anything. And it's a great way to just like first and foremost build community. But that's also where people come to say like, I'm really struggling with this. Like, how do you approach this? And then now we're starting to build those best practices. And as we build out the whole kind of POSIT onboarding infrastructure, our hope is that and like internal packages, like I think building that into like vignettes, right? Or like Confluence document. I haven't tried this out yet, but I did see that Quarto is supporting like Confluence documentation, which is awesome because our team uses Confluence pretty significantly, but I hate anything that's not like programmatic. So I want to have it as a script in R, and like I can automate, or like I can get in R and like alter that script, but then like send those updates. So yeah, maybe not the best answer, but just be comfortable with iterating and like make sure that you're always communicating with each other and building strong relationships. Yeah.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Natalie.
I think that focus on relationships first, that might end up being the title of this one. Greg, I see you have your hand raised. Want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned some of the reporting that you're doing out of Shiny. So are you also, in addition to Workbench, are you using Connect?
Yes. Yeah. So the app will be deployed on Connect, and then we do a ton of ad hoc reporting, which again, right now is kind of like, here's a Google spreadsheet with like the answers to your question, or here's like at most like a PDF of our markdown report. But hopefully once we have like the whole infrastructure running, that will all live in a landing page that's continuously updated. Again, my focus on like parameterizing everything, but using the pins package, right, to like add metadata to whatever you're deploying, whether it's a report, an app, or anything, and then having that all land in a central page. Yeah, I think that's a big, one of the big benefits of the whole like POSIT infrastructure.
Absolutely. We talked about pins last week, I think, right?
Yeah,
Good to hear.
absolutely.
Thanks.
Lots of love for pins. I see, Jared, you had asked a question on recommendations. You want to jump in?
Sure. I think I asked this about every talk, but any books that you recommend, Natalie, that you have read that would be of use to this group, I guess?
Yeah, I saw Curtis recommended the engineering production grade Shiny apps. So that is definitely a great one. I find well, I wouldn't say I'm not a book learner. Like I've gone through like the R packages book and took pretty detailed notes on that. So all of like I feel like there's like an R canon, which is like R for data science first and foremost. Then you've got like advanced R and, you know, R packages and those things. So those are always like great references. But I'm the kind of person that tends to learn a lot from like tutorials and things. So again, I'm bringing up the Rhino framework just because I love it so much. And I basically learned that just by going through their tutorial. And then there's obviously people within the R community that I follow their blogs and learn a lot from them. So the system I developed for this reporting system is heavily, so it's like built in the Rhino framework, but it borrows heavily from Jiwan Hyo, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But he put out a blog post on using R6 classes and gargoyle triggers to kind of like manage reactivity within your app. And I wanted to make sure that people weren't like accidentally running a ton of database queries. So I built the system in a way to like, when someone kind of selects their filters, they select their filters, they click the action button, it runs a dbplyr query, it saves the results of that to an R6 object that I then pass around to different modules to build visualizations, run analyses, whatever, and then like populate slide decks by transferring it to the Google API. So there's like a whole slew of things there. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I feel like I lost track of your original question there. Apologies if I.
No, that's great. I in terms of books, if there's anyone
books
that you follow, like social media wise, that you feel like has been a big influence on how you've done your work.
Yeah.
Essentially helping, you know, the muses and mentors that you feel like you've gathered or garnered.
Yeah. So Emily Ryder, big fan. She'll be on here next week. Maya Gans for Shiny app development, huge influence, awesome person too. Who Jiwan Hyo, I really loved his blog post on R6 classes and gargoyle triggers. I thought it was a really clever approach and completely stole it for my own work. But that's the benefit, right? Steal like an artist. That's the name of the talk that Charla and Jamaka are doing at Posit. Trying to think, I'm sure I'm missing other people that are huge influences. I mean, obviously like all the people from Posit, you know, Hadley, but and then like Jenny Bryan, right? I the amount of times that I have sent around her thing of like, if your script starts with set working directory, I will come into your office and set your computer on fire. I use that a lot. So yeah, so lots of influences. There's just such an amazing community of our users, and that's what made me want to continue down this whole career path.
I love it. I know we talked a bit about like building a business case in the beginning, and we were just talking about this internally, like, is there a way that I could make like this tool or calculator for people? And I was just wondering, like, in building a business case, did you actually have to put like a monetary value to like what you would provide, or like saving money for automations? I don't know, just curious.
Yes, for sure. And I'll answer that. I just wanted to, someone mentioned like integrating design thinking and data science. And another like influence of mine that's like a blog post, course, whatever person is Brian O'Neill. He does a lot of like designing human-centered data products. So I'll just plug his work as also being a really big influence and someone you should check out if you want to build tools that people actually use, which I hope we all do. But yeah, as far as putting a like number on what we would be offering, I have the world's best manager. I could not go on about that anymore. He's wonderful and much more business savvy than I am. So he helped set me up with the team. We did kind of like a whole now I'm forgetting because I'm not the business person, but we did kind of survey people in terms of like, how much time are you spending building a single slide deck? Like, where are all the places that you have to go? Like on average, you spend say 10 hours building this slide deck. And then, hey, if all of these data points were populated automatically for you, how much time would be remaining? So we kind of use that, and then obviously like factoring in people's salaries and all of these things, and then came up with like a rough estimate of the time cost savings that building out this app would have. So, and building, this is kind of another like good piece of advice, is like the app I built now, like I don't think anyone would have been able to see that if I just like started with that, like building MVEs or MVP, like little pieces of the pie. Like I started off doing parameterized reporting with R Markdown, and people were like, that's amazing. But the problem with that is that I can't quite, people aren't going to have the kind of flexibility on the end. So I'm like, this is great. This is how we actually like populate slide decks with data insights. But if you want the flexibility to change the branding, alter the wording, all of this stuff, like this is our next MVP. And then you just kind of like work your way up to like, now I have a production grade Shiny app that does all of this for you. But always kind of like building in little chunks that get you there.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you. I know that people are doing this, but I never know like exactly how you do it. So that's cool that you like polled everybody and asked how much time they were spending doing something. These are the fastest hours of the week, so I know we're coming to the end here. But a question I've recently started asking that I really like is, what's the best, or sorry, not best, what's the piece of advice that comes to mind to you that you've either given to somebody on your team or that you've received over the course of your career? Could be the best piece or just whatever comes to mind.
I don't think I follow this as much as I should because I let my enthusiasm get the best of me, but my manager is always giving me the advice that is very well given, which is under promise, over deliver. Like, it's classic advice, but like that is what you need to be doing. So like, I get so excited about building the community around stuff that I'm like, look, guys, this is what I did today. And like, I want to grab them and be like, how can you use it and do all that? But like, oftentimes it's better to just like put some brakes on and say like, I'm going to like make sure I get this like really ironed out. I document how I did it. I do, whatever you need so that it's not just like, hey, like watch me program this and like build it up. Like, that's fine. I do a lot of pair programming with people, but if you can kind of like get something like real nice and streamlined and like professional looking before like showing everybody, that's kind of the way to go. So under promise, over deliver, best advice that I often don't follow.
I feel the exact same. Our president was just telling me earlier today to focus on a few important things instead of all of these important things.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just double check. I want to check on some of the questions if I missed anything. So feel free to put it back into the chat or raise your hand here. But I think it's so cool that your team does the office hours and you have this community group too. And I was just wondering a little bit more about like what the office hours look like. So if somebody wanted to start that at their team, like, is it virtual? Is it an hour?
Yeah, so we do 1 hour every 2 weeks. And I think it's hard, like we've kind of ended up at this right now, just doing like informal gatherings. So like, I'm there for the hour, whoever like stops in, if you have any questions, again, just trying to like make sure people know that there are no stupid questions, like not being judgmental. Like if you're like struggling with something that like I can spot the issue in 2 seconds, not being like, why don't you understand this? You don't know how to use the command line. Well, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Just like, hey, we solved a problem together. This was exciting. This was fun. And so that gets people to like want to come back and bring their questions and all of those things. Right now, we don't have an agenda. We are wanting to hopefully move, especially like now that we're like really starting to iron out all of the installation stuff with Posit. We're hoping to use those office hours as a time for onboarding people into that system. So hoping to do like little workshop series on like using Git and GitHub within Posit and, how to deploy something onto Connect. And so I think that will give us like a really nice kind of series of things to go through, but it can be hard because people have like their jobs that they need to do. And so building community is just kind of one of those things. I talk to like my BetterUp coach all the time about like, that's just how I approach my work, no matter whether you pay me to or not. Like, I'm going to try and build a community. Like, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
I just,
Thank you.
I'd like to jump in because we have an office hours set up as well. And we actually ended up kind of divorcing the office hours from the how-tos and the onboarding things because we ended up, the interest in those has kind of a season. And so we would have like, okay, here's what we're going to talk about in this week's like our user group, as opposed to like our office hours where people are bringing those more ad hoc questions. But definitely as we were building up to that, it was just kind of one meeting. And then we found, okay, we do the office hours once a month and the user group once a month, but on opposite every 2 weeks kind of thing. So it's like still the 2-week timeline, but different focus.
Yeah, I think that I might have to take that advice to heart. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice to have, well, I always think about that because of the Hangouts too. It is nice having the like informal session where anything can come up as well.
Absolutely.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for joining and sharing your experience with us. If people want to get in touch with you, is LinkedIn the best way, or?
Yeah. So you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. I do still have a Twitter, but I haven't really checked it since the like forceful takeover that you all know what I'm talking about. Haven't been as active on Mastodon, but I'm also on there. So yeah, happy to chat. Thank you.
Awesome. And I want to make sure I share the data science by design too. I could share these links with the recording too.
Please, yeah, definitely check out our new anthology series. It's gonna be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Nice to see you.